Welcome everyone to our weekly democracy briefing. We're excited to have you join us tonight. Jamie is going to introduce our guests very soon. I'm Lori Coleman, Director of Strategy with DemCast. And if you have not, this is your first time joining us, DemCast was incorporated as a 501c4 about 3 years ago with our mission is to help enable people to use their social media channels for good, whether that's making promoting a candidate, promoting an action to take, working on saving our democracy right now. So we're very glad to have you. And also this will be recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel later if you need to step away or you missed your chance to view it tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jamie Carter.
Well, we are very excited to have Christian and Dan here tonight. Christian has worked in rapid response and strategic communications for the U.S. Senate Majority Leadership Communications Center, Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and Washington, D.C. Mayor's Office. And he was a DNC committee surrogate for the 2020 Obama presidential campaign. And he's currently the campaign director of Way to Win's Midterm Messaging Project. And then Dan integrates research, data, and strategy to build tools and campaigns that strengthen democracy. He helped create and build interest in numerous products and campaigns in 20 years of experience in startups, technology, companies, political tech, and academia, working with tools from advertising to voter files to artificial intelligence. From 2017 to 2010, he built California Voter Connect, a nonprofit social venture that provided advanced online voter file tools and training to community-based organizations and both large and small campaigns. So and he is the author of Venus Shrugged, a science fiction novel where the advanced technologies are and relationships and democracy since 2016. He has been an award-winning independent media strategist. So we are going to let them take it away. And if you guys have questions during this, please use the Q&A.
Cool. Thank you so much for having us. I wasn't sure if you were going to do intros, and I wanted to start almost with a little story of the story of self, since there's probably a lot of organizers on this call. There's always a million ways to tell a story of self, right? But like, I was a field and data person. Like, I was like all about door knocking, and the thing that I hated doing that was you go and knock on somebody's door. I did this multiracial coalition in Santa Barbara. Like, we did a lot of door knocking, and you would go and knock on someone's door and the TV would be on in the background and some god-awful ad would be on there, right? Like, it was always just the worst feeling. And for a long time, it's like, we don't need ads. We just knock on more doors, you know? I have so much respect for people who do the hard work of field, who do the stuff like what you DemCast people, what folks do, sharing on social media, day-to-day grinding, building audiences, talking to people, talking to your friends. We have to fix the media environment also. Like, we can't keep having these experiences where the hard work that you all are doing and anybody who does any field is doing, making phone calls, all the hard work isn't being supported by the messages that they're seeing in paid media. So that's kind of like where I came from and where I started out. And Christian, I don't know if you want to like go and like add anything to your sort of background, but I think you're kind of a similar story.
Yeah, so two things just very quickly. Way to Win, the organization that Dan and I are working for and with, it is devoted to the marshaling of the power of a multiracial coalition, white, Black, Latino, AAPI voters, Native Americans as well. And it's just critically important this cycle that we do that. And that's part of why I do the work. But the other part of the work is that we get to create and test content aimed at moving this multiracial coalition of voters, which Dan will explain a little bit more in our presentation. But critically important that we're inspiring the base, we're inspiring people who care about this country, who love this country and want to participate in the political process. We got to give them a reason. And that's a big part of the work that we do today together.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to dive into our presentation here, if the technology gods are pleased. Oops, wait, not that. This. There we go. All right, how the slides look. Good, cool. All right. So over the past, well, this is now my third or fourth cycle of doing this, but we're going to focus on sort of the work that we've been doing since 2021. When the election ended in 2020, and then the Senate campaign happened, Way to Win worked. We had a little project there that ended up sort of being a big project, and that was we sort of did another pilot of our ads in the Georgia campaign, and that was a wild time. People probably remember, like, everyone was watching this wild race, and we were throwing these ads up and trying to do, and there were, I think it was $700 million got thrown around in the last month and a half there. We had a little tiny campaign that we did. When that ended, then the next day was, we all know, January 6th. We kept going at that point, like, especially when January 6th happened. We just didn't slow down. We've still been working on making ads, and the system that we have kind of come up with now over the last 3 cycles. This is, like, on some level, this is sort of what everybody who makes ads does, right? Or does any kind of message development. The messages that you see on a walk sheet are probably developed with a pretty similar process, but where in a lot of cases, I'm sure you all run into this. The democratic messaging will just be about where people are at. It'll just be talking to where people are at. And we've sort of taken the approach that Anat Shenker-Osorio takes, which you probably, I'm not looking at the chat, but I'm guessing a lot of people recognize her name too, where that the purpose of the research is to make what needs to be said popular, not to be able to just say whatever's popular, right? So we need to make the issues about making a more fair world and saving the world from climate. We need to figure out how to reach people with those and how to make them work better than the scary, divisive stuff that the Republicans send them. So we kind of started out this process with a really deep research program where we're working with a woman named Gretchen Barton at Worthy Strategy, who came out of one of these commercial firms that does kind of creepy metaphor stuff and, like, digs into all that. And she helps us do these ethnographic studies where we sort of we ask people things like, if you could bring up an image of, upload an image for us of, like, what represents the Democratic Party, what represents the Republican Party. When we do that, we sort of get more of an idea of, like, sort of what the unconscious sort of feelings that people have about the parties are. And then we sort of use that to figure out how to move them. So then we have a bunch of different creative teams that we work with. I think right now we have 5, 6, I don't even know. Our life is like making scripts and talking to people and looking at the first versions and then sending edits and more scripts. It's just like a sort of never ending cycle. And then we have a bunch of different testing methodologies that, hang on 1 second, sorry about that. We test them using one method is through randomized control trials and what we call opinionless studies. And that's most of what the data that we're going to look at here. But there's also a couple different other methods that we use. Sometimes we just put them on we have a sort of web panel tool that we use called Recollective, where it's sort of like the old-fashioned dial test, right? Where we would just, like, let people sort of tell us how they feel about a video. And sometimes we just ask them, we're just like, what'd you think of this, right? Does it work? What do you like, what do you not like? That kind of thing. And then now we're sort of getting around to the point of hopefully being able to deploy some of these and get these out at the sort of, at the scale that they need to sort of reach voters in all the states that we need to reach them in the congressional districts. One thing that's kind of fun about media is I was looking at some of the numbers today, and on the one hand, the sort of media budgets that you see are mind-blowing. It's $50 million, $70 million, $100 million. The Republicans just announced a $43 million thing that the old Karl Rove thing is doing. On the one hand, that's true. On the other, it's, we pay sometimes $20 per 1,000 impressions is sort of how they figure it out. That's 2 cents, right, for each impression that we're getting. So a nickel is reaching 2.5 voters with not a thing that's going to change their mind the way that a door knock would, but it's at least one more sort of, like, drop that's sort of moving voters in the right direction. And that's, that's why this stuff is powerful and why campaigns do it so much. So diving into the content. So a lot of times we test, opposition ads, right? Like this one, I think it's going to go to another. Okay, here we go.
Before Russian bombs began to rain on Ukraine, before hundreds of innocent Ukrainians lost their lives, a horrific decision had already been made.
So I'm not going to, that one, I'm not going to play the whole thing. You get the idea where that's going, right? And this one, it was pretty successful, except if you, I think people can see what I'm doing on the screen there. If you look at this, it mobilized very liberal voters, and this is out of the testing thing that we use called Swayable. It mobilized very liberal voters a little bit. It actually demobilized conservatives. Now, it persuaded them. A negative number on here is like bad for us. It means people are moving more towards supporting Republicans than Democrats, but it was demotivating them. We don't usually know why in these tests, right? Like we can kind of guess, especially if we've seen a bunch of ads, but like that. So there's like a little tiny bit of good news here that like on the one hand, like it's persuading people and moving them towards Trump, but it's also not mobilizing them. So that could be good. And we also, Christian talked a little bit about the multiracial coalition. And when we test, we make sure that we are looking at across demographics and across ages. And we have the tool that we use lets us look at a bunch of other different variables, but those are kind of the big ones that we look at. Age in particular. After Virginia, we've been very focused on making sure that older voters are that our messages are resonating with them too. Christian, did you want to add anything about this one?
Mostly, just to sort of preface all this by saying we always put this one up at the top to show what we're up against and how effective their messages can be, and why we need to be more strategic in how we talk about what we've done and how extreme they are, and making sure to call for multiracial solidarity.
They're not pulling punches is sort of the point here. Like they're going for it. Okay, so now we also look at content from our allies. We look at ads that other Democrats have made, and we kind of see how they do. So you can see, looking at this, like there's good Biden approval numbers here. We look at something when we think about sort of how the mobilization is working, in this part of the grid here. We use something called a fire index, which is a metric that we sort of made up like last year because it was a pattern that we were noticing. And all the fire index says is how much it's motivating people on the more liberal side of the scale versus how much it's mobilizing people on the more conservative side of the scale. So this has, now you can see the numbers aren't, they don't have like a dark blue color there, which means they're not statistically significant. So this isn't, and this is, we use an 80% confidence interval, which is sort of a midpoint between really just kind of guessing and having like a very rigorous sort of academic approach to it. In this case, this isn't like a huge strong effect, but like the fact that we're not getting a significant boost from more liberal voters here, significant, not only not statistically significant, but not at all, like it's close to zero, is like, it doesn't mean that the ad is failing, but it's like, it's not exactly what you want to see. What we would love to see is for people to watch an ad and be like, I can't wait to vote. I want to go do stuff. I want to volunteer. That's what we're shooting for, right? So this ad uses sort of what we've called a sort of mellow storytelling approach. And again, I'll just play the beginning of it so you can get
People are hurting. People are tired. People have seen what they've worked their entire lives to build turned upside down at a moment's notice. They're wondering when things will get back to normal, and at the same time not knowing what normal even means anymore. At my heart, I am and always will be a pastor.
I'm tempted to let it go because I love that ad. It's just, it does, one thing this ad does do really well is it has we'll make sure everybody gets the deck and you can watch all these later. It has a really good, like, warm feeling to it. I mean, Pastor Warnock is amazing, but like, it's a really, really good ad. But, like I said, we're a little concerned about this, about what we're seeing in the fire index there. So here's another one. This is, I'll start out playing this one because it's fun.
Have you ever wondered what President Biden is doing for a town like ours? Just take a look around. $400,000 for our volunteer fire departments. $150,000 for after-school programs for our kids, and $11 million to repair busted pipes.
So this one has lots of blue and lots of good mobilization, right? Like this is really like, these are all really good signs that there's like a lot of mobilization across different segments. One of the things that I really like about that ad is that it takes, sometimes we found when we talk to people and when we ask them, like in the ethnographic studies, we're like, what have Democrats done? They're like, oh, like a number that's like a $3 trillion infrastructure plan. Nobody knows what that means. I don't know what that means. Like I've studied economics my whole life. I don't know what $3 trillion is, right? But if you take that and say, these are the concrete benefits to your town, right? This is the pipes that we're going to build. These are the, the sewers we're going to fix. That's a really effective approach. Again, looking at the fire index, this one is a little concerning. There's, in this, we see that it's very mobilizing to conservatives. Might be good, might be bad. We don't know what direction it's motivating them, but it may be motivating them to vote for Democrats. We don't know, but it's a little bit concerning. But the good thing about this is it is persuading them. So there is like a strong persuasive effect happening. So overall, this seemed like this ad is a pretty good approach, and there's that slight concern around the fire index, but looks pretty good. So this one has sort of like, it is like even worse. It's not persuading. It's not persuading more liberal voters, and it's actually demotivating them. I'm not going to play this one. It's very, very heavy on bipartisanship, and what we're kind of seeing, the pattern that we feel like we're kind of seeing, we're still doing research on this, but we kind of feel like if you go and ask voters if they want bipartisanship, they say, oh yes, oh, and what's really driving that is like this super strong desire that people have to get back to normal. I'm sure everyone, if you're out talking to people, if you're talking to people on Twitter, if you're talking to your family, everyone wants things to get back to normal. They think bipartisanship is the way to do that. And yet when we go to use bipartisanship in an ad, it's not actually persuading them to do what we want to do, which is go out and vote for Democrats. So, and still more research is needed on that. There may be ways to work it in, but that's what we found so far. This one is another sort of like the Warnock ad. It's kind of in the, it's in the sort of what we've been calling the sort of the mellow storytelling style. Again, the same pattern, there's just like not a lot happening in the mobilization score. They're pretty strongly persuasive. This is another ad that's beautiful. This was one of the best testing ads in a sort of another testing program with some folks that we're working with. It's really beautiful. Like once we're done, we'll make sure everybody has a copy of the deck. Maybe we can put the link in the chat too, so that you can just go watch these, because they're a lot of them are like beautiful and moving, and this one's no exception. But it doesn't quite hit that positive fire index. So okay, so on to the ones that we've made. And sorry, Christian, did you want to say anything about those four? I kind of skipped through them.
No, just very quickly on the macro level. I think one thing that's really important about some of these is, if we're demobilizing our liberal base while energizing conservative and moderate Republicans, that's not a good ad. So like the Raphael Warnock ad is an example where it is a good ad. It's an incredible ad, but it is not necessarily getting, all of the people that he needs to turn out and vote for him in the state energized. So, and I think that's just something that I remember I saw this ad before we actually tested it, and I thought it was an incredible ad. And then when I was looking at these numbers, I was like, oh, well, this is actually not helping us the way that we need it to right now. And I think there's a lot of times Republicans never talk about bipartisanship. We spend a lot of time talking about bipartisanship, demobilizing part of our base, while they're always trying to mobilize and get their voters out to vote against Democrats and for Republicans.
Yeah, we have found, sorry, not to correct you on this, Christian, but there's a, every once in a while, a Republican will talk about it. And there's, in fact, I don't know if I can switch over to the other tab here. It doesn't want to do it. Never mind. Oh boy, hang on. So we did a study of the 2020 ads. We were actually able to buy the database of all the ads from a company called Ad Impact that we also use to sort of track the ads that are going on. And every once in a while, like in a few districts, they just do it way less. The Democrats, like it was, I forget what the actual numbers were. You can actually go and see how much. I'll send this link around too. We can maybe drop them in the chat later. But you can actually go and look at all the ads where the Republicans talked about bipartisanship. And it's usually like it's in a different context too. They'll be like, well, I'm for conservative values and also I'm bipartisan. You know, like it's like it doesn't make any sense, but like it's just part of their argument because they're like, oh, people like bipartisan, but they also like strength and whatever. Right? Okay, so the ads that we've made, really important concept. This is a little academic, just want to dive into this a little bit. But I've got a nice Jamel Bowie tweet here that sort of boils it down. Status threat is sort of the, like, I feel like right now is the key to underlying this. There was an academic paper that somebody wrote after 2016, and then there have been a bunch of studies that said that, you know, if you, in the whole debate about was it economic anxiety or how did Trump win, whatever, that if you just look at like people feeling threatened about their position in society, that was the most correlative variable to whether they supported Trump or not. And it's white guys who feel threatened and can't navigate the changes in our culture, which there's people should be able to handle it, but like they need to do better. But it's true that a lot is changing in our world, right? So there's a lot of territory for conservatives to scare people and divide people. And there's actually a huge sort of psychological like body of research on this. And it's not obvious or clear how to make it, how to ameliorate this, how to make it, you know, how to sort of walk people through it. But that's kind of what we're shooting for. And this is what we're thinking about a lot. And for people who know Anat Shenker-Osorio's work, you know, race class narrative, you're going to see little bits of it in here, you know, like, or even sort of more than little bits. Like we use a lot of RCN structures in our ads. So Christian, go for it.
Yeah, there was just one thing that I wanted to add here, and I think it's really important. Status threat, traditionally, and as Dan explained, is usually reserved for white people, but increasingly what we've seen because of COVID, because of a lot of the inflation and gas prices stuff, we're seeing it in communities of color. Black, Latino, AAPI people are also very concerned about their status. So a lot of their content, Republicans' content, is designed to split that multiracial coalition that we were talking about at the beginning. So one thing that is really key to the work that we've done here and the content that we've done is we want to keep that coalition together. And literally saying, we've done this before, we can do it again, white, black, Latino, AAPI, working to elect Democrats and to save the country. I think there's some version of that, which we will see more of right now.
Yep. And that is, everyone probably recognizes it, totally stolen from Obama. Like that was just the Obama, like sort of basic part of his stump speech. And that's been, Christian makes, this is an excellent point. This is a super important point. I was like, white guys are part of it, but you know, when trans visibility is being highlighted and people are like fanning flames around that attack can be used across anybody, you know, any cis person can, you know, they can weaponize that and use it to, you know, to go after Latino men, Latino women, everybody, you know, is potentially scared about about how things are changing with gender roles. I mean, gender roles are fundamental to our identity. And, you know, people on this call, we probably all feel like what's happening with children now and what's happening with the trans movement is people are throwing off these deep, powerful bonds and throwing off the chains. And this is a sort of new level of freedom for humans. A lot of people don't feel that way. So like we've got a lot of work to do in communicating that. So this is an ad. And by the way, a lot of these ads were made by Chuck Roach's firm, Solidarity Strategies, who we are huge fans of. And we've done a mix of sort of live action and studio scripts. This was one of the live action ones that we did. And I think we'll play this whole thing.
Mi abuelo always said, watch what they do, not what they say. Republicans say that they are with our community, yet they vote against COVID relief money, block childcare assistance, oppose the jobs bill in Congress, and refuse to investigate the attacks on January 6. But Joe Biden and Democrats passed COVID relief and an infrastructure bill to rebuild roads, bridges, and to invest in childcare. Watch what they do, not what they say.
So that's a pretty basic contrast ad. And yet it's a narrator with a moderately strong accent who seems Latino, not the kind of characters that you usually see in Democratic ads. And what we found in that was it works about as well with white folks as it does with anybody else. In fact, it was more mobilizing for white people. And that when we got this result back, it made me think of this moment that kind of went semi-viral on Twitter. I think it was Ro Khanna was on Bill Maher, right? And Bill Maher is like, I don't watch Bill Maher, and I have a very strong negative reaction to almost everything that he does. But he was on there, and Ro Khanna was laying down and even for Bill Maher's audience, when he said, we are a multiracial country and we're going to build a functioning multiracial democracy, it was an applause line for his audience, right? Like people and even conservatives actually they've really bought this thing that Democrats are the racist ones. They really, not all of them, but like a good chunk of the more persuadable ones actually believe that Republicans are the anti-racist ones, and they really want to live in a multiracial country, and they're not innately racist. They've been sort of, all the status threat stuff has wound them up a lot, but there are ways to unwind this, and we feel like this is sort of one step towards that. It was persuasive. Again, we didn't have a hugely strong fire index. This wasn't super motivating. It's a kind of basic message, like it wasn't like, it doesn't have a lot of like fire in the belly, right? But at least it's not backfiring, right? Like at least it's not motivating conservatives more than liberals. So like a sort of flat index, like this, like a low number isn't the worst outcome, especially when it's persuasive sort of across all sorts of different demographics. So the next one, okay, so this, I think I'm going to play this one too, because this is sort of.
President Biden and Democrats are getting the balance right, fighting COVID and delivering the best economy for workers in 50 years. But some extreme Republicans are trying to divide us, attacking the Capitol to overturn election results, pitting parents against teachers, limiting the freedom to vote, even burning books. America rejected chaos and division in 2020. We can do it again. Paid for by Way to Win Action Fund. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
So in that one, we didn't have we've come together before across all our differences, Black and white and Latino. We didn't explicitly did that, but we kind of hinted at it at the end. So we're playing around to see because in the 30-second ad, you have 77 words, right? So we've been kind of playing with like how sort of compressed we can make that and still sort of get that idea across. But again, it's a basic contrast. It's the structure we're doing here is sort of positive and then negative and then positive. We had some good news at the beginning of hang on, I'm on the wrong. There you go. That's the script that we're on. This line about it being the best economy for workers in 50 years is sort of true. I mean, yes, inflation is happening. In a lot of scripts, we sort of throw in something about there was a line from some text that we wrote too that worked that was we've come a long way, and there's a lot more to do, like taking on inflation. But this is, I mean, the thing is with all the union drives that we're seeing, and with unemployment being this like unbelievably low, that it really is, workers do have leverage for the first time in a long time in this economy, and we have to get the story out there. We have to tell a story about the positive things that are happening. Everybody knows the negatives, but there are positive things happening in this economy right now, and it's a very, very challenging environment, but that's one of the challenges. Christian? Yeah.
So one thing that's really important about this ad, and I think you can apply this to your day-to-day life, and we hear this all the time when we present this to political committees or action groups or anybody. They basically say, well, when we talk about the positive things, we know that voters get really upset. And that's probably true. And the key to that is when you talk about the positive things and then contrast it with the craziness of the Republican Party, people are a lot more amenable to what you're saying. And I really want to underline this, because on their own, if you just go positive, people kind of like tune you out. If you just go negative, sometimes people will just tune you out. So it's the combination of those contrasts with the calling out the multiracial coalition, or showing the multiracial coalition in this case, which is a very powerful thing for people to see each other working together to make the country stronger, better. People like that right now. People like a little bit of optimism and positivity. And this is definitely seen across our testing with this particular ad.
Right. And I think part of what, and you can see in that, I didn't even really look at the data, but or talk about the data, very persuasive to the middle and the left. Like this is like in our dream world, this is what we're shooting for all the numbers, right? A little persuasive to conservatives, maybe they don't really know what to think. but the moderates and the more liberal voters are like, this is the story, both mobilizing and support. These are really good numbers. We feel like this is the best testing ad in this flight of ads that we did. This is what we want to see. And I think part of it also is that this ad isn't Pollyanna-ish. This ad is taking a kind of specific fact about the economy that is pretty arguably true. And even people who are worried about inflation would probably say, yeah, it is a good economy for workers. There was one stat that we looked up and we put it in one of our other ads. 75 million Americans got new jobs last year. Like if you look at the overall rate of churn and everything, which is like, that's like almost a third of the country, like a lot. Because we picked this up in Qual too, when we were interviewing people, we'd be like, how's the economy going for you? People would be like, oh, I got a new job. I got, I have better hours, better pay, and then we would say, how is the economy going? They'd be like, the economy overall is terrible, even though I got this better job. Right. So like there's this dichotomy between what's out in the media and the narrative that's going on. And this is, people are also for sure freaked out about gas prices, inflation, and housing prices. We can't just ignore that, but we can kind of include, that there is some positive, there are some bright spots to the economy. So there's two here that are kind of on the same. I don't think I'm going to play both of these. I'm going to play the second one. So these, one of the things that we've started to do, and we've done a little more of this year, that we've had the production capacity and budget to be able to do, is to do small tests of things. This is is our second take at a CRT ad. We wrote one last year that we kind of liked, we thought was good. And then this was actually sort of where we got the tracking the fire index idea. We realized this was the first ad that we wrote. Like the overall, we don't even have the overall numbers on here, but the overall mobilization was pretty good. We were like, oh, good. And then we looked at it, we saw it was only motivating conservatives and had like a -8 fire index. We're like, maybe we should pay attention to that. So this was our second take at it. And we did, because of the way our funding works, we can do political ads and then just sort of those issue-based ads where, like, if you see an ad that ends with like, call such and so and tell them to quit being a jerk, that's like a 501c4, like what DemCast can run. That's an ad that's what they call primary purpose, which is not political on some level, although they're all political too. So this one is the political one that talks about DeSantis. And then we did another version that just had Chris Rufo. And I don't know if we're going to get in trouble for attacking an activist, but they attack our activists all the time, so we're going to attack theirs, right? And it's very gentle the way that we go after him. But this ad was really interesting because you can see the mobilization is only over here, and it wasn't that persuasive for liberals. It was more persuasive for conservatives. And this is, we're not super focused on white working class because it's not one of the primary objectives that we have for going after. But this was the most effective ad with him, and I'll play this one briefly here because we're trying to figure this out. And I like this one.
The freedom for kids to live their dreams starts in safe and welcoming schools. And 4 out of 5 Americans agree. Kids should learn the good and the bad of our history so we can build a better future. But some extremists are trying to divide us, even pitting parents against teachers. America has united for big change before. We can do it again. Paid for by Way to Win Action Fund. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
So that, one of the things to sort of note about this is that 4 out of 5 Americans agree. And some of the ads, we put the citation in there for where that actually come from. There was a poll result that showed like 80% of parents agree with this. The reason you see that all the time in 4 out of 5 dentists agree or whatever is because that kind of social proof is an extremely effective persuasion tactic. And on this issue, conservatives really are on the wrong side of this, and they say, we're okay teaching slavery. No, it's like they really don't want anything that makes kids uncomfortable, and it's ridiculous what they're trying to do. And there is really strong polling opposing that. Reproductive freedom is the other one where there's a +80 if you say, should the decision be between a woman and her doctor versus, should the government have a say in it? It's +80 or it's +81 or something. Like there are these poll results when a question is framed correctly that there's a huge positive result. And those are the kinds of things that we try to use in ads because that's what we want people to be thinking about and what we want voters to be thinking about. One last one in here. forget between these two. Oh, this is another one that sort of gets at extremists. This is the 75 million jobs one too. I'll play this too. This one, we made two versions of this, and the previous one was more about vaccines, and it's now it feels a little dated. It's like this one holds up.
Last year, 75 million Americans started new jobs with better pay, hours, and benefits. But there's still so much more to do. President Biden and the Democrats are taking on the big corporations that are raising your prices, while some Republicans refuse to help and keep trying to divide us, like by banning and even burning books. America rejected division in 2020. We can do it again. Paid for by Way to Win Action Fund, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
And that one, I haven't watched it in a couple of weeks. I feel like it sort of holds up even better now with the price gouging thing than it did when we made it. Sometimes we'll retest these things and just see how they're doing. You know, basic message, we've gone through sort of trying to make 30-second or 60-second ads. We've sort of ended up on 30 because it forces us to write more aggressively and to like boil our ideas down to a stronger argument. But that, I think that ad would still do really well. Go, Christian.
Really quickly, and I want to just emphasize this to exclamation point. Republicans are not popular with voters. When voters find out or hear all of the crazy shit that Republicans have done, are doing, they are grossed out, repulsed. And I mean that even with some Republicans, right? Some moderate, Republicans, when they hear this stuff, they see this stuff, they're like, oh, I'm not going to vote for these guys. So to the degree with which we can always be reminding voters of how extreme these guys are. I mean, the funny thing about this project, and I wish I was joking, but we can't keep up with all the crazy shit that Republicans are doing lately, right? Like we think that we put all of the horrible things that they've done into an ad, and then something else happens and we have to go back to the drawing board. So
except I feel like we're close to getting it. We now know that there's like 4 or 5 big things. We have another round of ads to make, but we're close. Like we know it's going to be about repro, immigration, like inflation, like we're trying to check off the big things here. And
that actually brings me,
we have a shot.
Dan is actually raising one other really important thing. We hear a lot about inflation and gas prices. Republicans literally have no plan to do anything about inflation, no plan to do anything about gas prices. And on the gas prices front, Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of the last president, is literally doing business with Saudi Arabia, right? He just got billions of dollars from this. So like, again, this stuff, it's just, there's so much. Right. And we really do have to talk about, we have to be better about lifting it up and talking about this to voters, because when they hear about it, they're grossed out.
Right. And we, you all are fairly online. Some of you very online. You know what's going on in the world, right? We are running this campaign partially to take what we know, people who are paying attention know, and try to get that out in the world. And speaking of that, these are the takeaways. I'll send these around. I don't think we kind of covered all these. I'm not necessarily going to go over all these, but I wanted to give you all a heads up because I think this community might have feedback and ideas for us. We are working on a landing page now that'll be the sort of end point of where our campaigns sort of point at. It's going to, I don't know what the URL will be yet. It's going to be like Decision 2020 or Decide 2022, not 2020. It'll be Decision 2022 or Decide 2022 or something like that. And it'll be we want it to be a nice, easy sort of centralized hub where people can just go and just get basic information about the election. It'll have the link to look up your voter reg. And then it's going to have a few of our ads. And if we get to it, I don't know whether we're going to be able to do this cycle, but we want to have short stories about written to a sixth or seventh grade level, whatever Fox News writes. I can't remember if it's 6th grade or 8th grade, but very short 400 or 500 word stories about gas prices, about, Medicare and Social Security, about, all the contrast issues and all the ways, even jobs. I mean, our Christian and I's friend, Simon Rosenberg, who is this centrist, he was in the Clinton War Room. He's been doing all this research on the job creation records of Democrats. 96% of jobs since the Berlin Wall fell have happened under Democratic presidents. And the fact we haven't even put that, we put that in one ad a while ago. It hasn't made it into our 30. We need to do an ad just on that, right? Like that's like, it's bonkers. Like we have such a story to tell the American people, and like the DC Democrats, like they're doing it sometimes. Christian's working super hard on influencing them, trying to get them on this. You all can kind of take up this mantle too, and what you're doing is so important. You know, there's definitely a story to tell here. So we want to help you all. We want to take what you all know and get it out to the world more. That's our whole goal over the next, between now and November. That's all we've got. And if there's, ideas people have, I see it looks like the chat's going crazy and there's a lot of questions. So like, we can have
well, and and what everyone on this call can do is take this advice and use it in the real world. When you're posting on Facebook, on Twitter, you're doing TikTok, when you're at the grocery store, when you're door knocking for candidates, you can take this and use this on a daily basis, which is one of the reasons I was so excited to have these guys on, because you are the best messengers for the Democratic Party.
Yeah. And we, one of the things that we have been very, very bad about so far is making these ads easily available to all of you so that you can share them easily. I swear we're going to fix that. That's partially what this website is about. We've really, we've been, in our credit, we're a very small team. We've been very focused on getting the work done and sort of getting all the research done and getting everything bolted down. We're kind of now, over the next couple of months, we will make this easier for you so that we can be helpful.
So I do want to answer some of. So I tried to answer some of the questions in the Q&A in the doc, and there was one. There was how much impact you attribute to words in an ad, and how much the images and social media do attention-getting gifts work, or should we focus on images with real people? I took a shot at answering this. I'm going to do it again just so that everybody can hear it, but I want to make sure Dan gets in on this. My view, any good ad can be understood without sound, right? Most people actually are watching these ads silently before they watch them with sound on, which is why the visuals have to be good to get people to watch with sound. So you need both strong vocals and words. It's my general take. And then regarding gifts versus real people, it's both, to be honest, right? You have different audiences for different types of content and whatnot. But that's generally what we found. Dan, I don't know if you wanted to add.
Yeah, on the getting the words right, there is a big sort of online debate around this about how much the words matter. Like the argument that like the Crooked folks are making, and like I'm a big fan of Crooked. Like I wasn't always, but I actually think like they've built a huge audience. They've done something incredibly difficult. Sometimes like Dan Pfeiffer's book I've been reading because it's all about this problem, right? And he's like, the words we say people have sort of misinterpreted his book to say the words that we say don't matter as much as building this megaphone. Really, we need both, because one of the things that we've found in the testing is like, I can't believe how much of a difference just like a few lines, one word in a script will give us super, super different results, like statistically significant different results. We had an ad about hard work that we'll get out soon. It wasn't in this deck, that we had a sort of like, we were, it's called a two-sided argument in advertising speak, where you sort of say part of the argument and then you try to knock it down, where we said, hard work is a part of who we are, right? When we pulled that line out and just left a weird kind of awkward, like empty space in the ad in the script where there's just there's like the video is happening, but there's no audio there, right? Or there's just music, right? That ad without the conservative argument in it actually did way better. So like, it's like, no quarter, don't make the conservatives arguments for you. They have plenty of money. They have plenty of ads that they're running, making them, we just need, it's so clear that we need to tell our story and just be strong and clear about who we are.
So the other question that we got from Jeffrey, does that message project work for all types of elections? So this actually is an important distinction, that question here, because we are doing, these are Dem brand ads. All of our content is just to boost the Dem brand nationally. We're not doing any candidate work specifically, but the idea here is that we are lifting up the wins and highlighting the extremeness of Republicans so that candidates up and down the ballot in a state can then have the freedom to do more biographical ads or different type of things, but we want to make sure that people are aware of what Democrats have done, which is a significant and has helped a lot of people, and the extremism of the Republican Party.
I just saw. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, and I think just highlighting the extreme, I mean, I'm in Utah, or obviously a red state, trying to unseat Mike Lee, and the coalition that we've built here to do that is across the board by highlighting Mike Lee's extremism and how that's not part of Utah's values. Now, that may not work in a lot of the country talking about values, but here it's a huge thing. And the Democrats in this coalition, we've been really highlighting not only just on Lee, but also on Romney, that Romney has voted against this and this and this. I thought he was supposed to be moderate. Well, that's not very moderate to me. And we're getting the Republicans agreeing with us.
So actually, this is an interesting point that you're raising. And I want to read Lillian LaFleur's question, because I think it gets to this. Don't you think that we also have to tell the people of how the Republican Party is changing or has changed into extreme right? Also tell them how they want to take over this country and become a dictatorship. We had a taste of it with Trump, but it's not only Trump, but most of the Republican Party today want to destroy democracy. So there's two things I wanted to respond to this. One, and this is a little silly, but we found it to be true in our polling. The distinction that you're making, Lillian, when we say some Republicans or most Republicans versus just saying all Republicans, is much more persuasive to voters. When we say all Republicans or just say Republicans, we always get comments or feedback like, well, it's not all Republicans, it's some Republicans. So if we say some Republicans, it's more persuasive to voters when they hear that. And then the other piece here that I would just raise for folks, MAGA is toxic to voters, right? MAGA is not popular. So you don't even really need to talk about Trump, but if one thing that I've taken to saying is, Republicans used to hide behind Donald Trump, but since Donald Trump has left office, they've actually become more extreme because of MAGA, because they keep trying to outdo themselves, in their craziness. So MAGA is the thing that we keep pointing people to. And so I did want to raise that. Dan, I don't know if you wanted to make any comments on this.
Yeah, no, that was exactly. Somebody asked in the chat about how not repeating their frames contrasts with or works with contrast. And what we'd done in that ad was we kind of repeated like some conservative language that we, in the qualitative studies that we've done, and we go talk to voters, like hard work is like this huge thing for voters. They're like, it's almost a third rail. It's like suggesting that people shouldn't work hard in this country is anathema to like what a lot of people would believe. Now, at the same time, what we've realized is that also people do think that which I think is true, we work way too hard and like we're kind of getting a crappy deal generally from the economy overall. A lot of people are, right? And those two things are a little bit in conflict. We thought maybe putting this ad sort of acknowledging that people think it is hard work would help with it. It didn't really. Like you can kind of just be like, look, we're like, we're getting a crappy deal.
So Kimberly Fellon, I'm sorry if I said that wrong, but I live in and about the most red district in Pennsylvania. My U.S. House Rep is an insurrectionist. I am not scared. I encourage everyone who speaks up because the voters are asking where the Dems are. So I want to ask what we do to get our state admins and party moving. First, Kimberly, thank you for doing that. Two, look, I feel very strongly here that we are in better shape than people believe. And I think, we have to keep going and engaging our state admins and our parties and our neighbors and our friends and our, family to get out there and get involved, because we can win. The Senate is very winnable, I think, right now. Fetterman is probably, we have a great shot at winning in PA right now. And I think the House, I think we're doing better shape than people think. In the generic ballot, right, when you just ask, do you prefer a generic Dem versus a generic Republican, we're starting to see traction, and we're beating Republicans in some of these generic ballot polls. So we got to keep at it.
That what on the not being doomed thing, one thing that like I haven't seen, like the generic bounces around, right? Like a little bit. You get a good poll one day and a bad poll. The average still seems kind of bad. But that also won't matter. Like, you know, somebody said in the chat, like, it depends on like the actual candidates. Like, we have Dr. Oz, whatever, like, the guy who ran like an incredibly horrifyingly violent ad in Missouri today. You know, like when you look at the people they're putting up, like JD Vance, like these people are horrible, right? So they're at the Senate level, and this will be true in Congress too, as we sort of get the congressional landscape. We'll find more weak candidates like this. But in terms of the overall position that we're at, you know, when we do these unconscious studies, and when we ask people to upload images for the when people upload images to the GOP, we get a lot of like, and we mostly don't do Trump people. We do all like sort of gettable voters, like anybody who believes that the election was stolen. We kind of just don't. We're not, for most of the research we do, we don't include them. But for everybody else, we get a lot of like devils and like the guys shaking hands in suits with money changing hands and bags of money and greed and like all like the overall. And for Democrats, sometimes we get mice and like weakness and holes and stuff like that, but like we also get a lot of like people working together and like holding hands and like love and like, you know, so like the overall brand positions of the two parties, like even though like clearly there's this thermostatic effect of like people are hurting right now from inflation, they want to blame whoever's in power, but there's like in those underlying, when we dig below the surface a little bit and talk to people about where the party brands are at, we're not doomed. We're not like the things that we believe about the Democratic Party and its ideals and its, you know, potential is more widely shared than you would anticipate. It was way better than I thought it would be when we started this study.
So to this point, what about Republicans in Congress could continue to vote along party lines, including Liz and Adam from Sarah Hayes? Listen, there's a lot of differing opinions out there, but it is my view that last election cycle, Democrats turned out 7 million more voters than Republicans. We need our base to turn out and vote this cycle. To the degree with which, you know, I say we need to highlight the extremism and the craziness of the Republican Party, I think that is a motivating factor for a lot of people within our base. And I just want to say we need to like get our base to vote. That's really my view. I know there's a lot of
persuasive to the right too. I mean, there's a lot of people who like, you know, are sort of at where my parents were at. God, now it's been like 10 years, but like they saw where the Republicans were going and like they didn't like it. And a lot of people voted for the Republicans anyway. They thought the stock market would do better under Republicans. They thought it would be better for them personally. You know, all these like over the long term, a movement and a party is making an argument to voters. And like that is what the Democrats haven't been doing as strongly. That's what you all are doing in your communities and online in a very good way. We're trying to persuade the Democrats to do that. You know, somebody said that DemCast is working with the DNC and like persuading them to do that too. Like it's changing. It is changing. It's changing very slowly, but the argument is there to be made. And like we can persuade super conservative people. A lot of them aren't racist and are open. Like they kind of know something's wrong with Trump. They kind of don't know for sure. And we can make these arguments to them and persuade them.
Sharon Avis has a question that's really important. Who is Dem base? Look, the way that we talk about it is a multiracial coalition of voters, Black, white, Latino, AAPI, Native American voters of varying ideological viewpoints. And I just want to go back to this thing about what we've done. And this kills me. I've said this, I say this to anybody who'll listen. You know, when you look, somebody was talking about the Latino and Black voters that they're trending Republican. That's not necessarily true. There are some that broke off, Latino and Black men, but it was on the economy. And this is what kills me about this particular polling data. When you ask those voters why they went over there, they would talk about all the jobs that Donald Trump created. They would talk about all the economic success Donald Trump had. The reality is Joe Biden has created like 4 times the number of jobs in his first year than Donald Trump did his entire election cycle, you know, his entire 4 years of being office. Like the economy is way better under Democrats every single time. We just never talk about it. That's the stuff, that's where we need to live, you know, in terms of getting people to understand what we've done to help them. Dan, did you're sharing
Yeah,
something?
I just added this slide about the about sort of like, this is one of the better, there's a couple slides like this that are floating around. There are a couple images like this. Catalyst had a really good image that was basically the same idea. These actual numbers I think are just from battleground states. It's actually a little more diverse. If you look at the country overall, the battlegrounds are a little bit wider. But this is how we think about it. And one thing to think about this is like, and this, I think our analysis has changed over the way to win, and my analysis has changed over the past couple of years, is that it's 58% white, right? Like there's a lot of white people that like are on board with this and like totally like doing it. Like that's a part of the coalition that we have to inspire and motivate to get out. But this coalition is just like, even like if it's the Republicans have this thing figured out. They have the numbers figured out so much that they can shave 2-3 points off an election, just move black men, just move, in Florida in 2018, they had a really narrowly targeted campaign just targeting black women around school choice, and got, they moved the black women numbers from like 90 to 70. And that was enough for DeSantis to win. That's where we need to play defense. Like we need to like be ready for those games. We found out about that campaign after the election, unfortunately. But they're, we're lucky to have such strong opponents, right? Like they're very, very good at this. And it's inspiring for us. So it's very challenging.
We had another good question here on Dem arguments, generally speaking, and I did want to make sure to answer this. Look, Dan has a lot of passionate feelings about the Dem violence that's occurring right now. I think it's terrible. I think it's horrible. And I think the where we came down on this is no Democrat should call another Democrat extreme. We should not be using Republican talking points about other Democrats, either way. And I think that was the most graceful way of saying that, nicest way of saying that. We should just not waste any time attacking each other when the Republicans are spending billions of dollars to attack us. So
if it's somebody on social media, don't make a bet that it's a real them doing that either. There's a lot of profiles and bots and trolls out there whose sole purpose is to engage you on that. And you just need to ignore those people.
Yes. I'm looking for any of these other. Recommended ways to use January 6th. Emphasize how terrible MAGA beyond Trump's inner circle. I just think, again, this is one of those things where there's so much out there that really just highlighting how unprecedented it is that any American, literally the only American history only American president in our history to ever basically attack our Capitol. That in everything that we test, everybody hates it. Republicans hate it, Democrats, like we don't need to be too specific, but just keep lifting that up because it is, voters hate it. Republican voters hate it. They don't like it either. I mean, it's terrifying to them. So Dan, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
Oh, just that we've had really good luck tying that to the rest of their extremism, right? Like the line that we used in one of the ads was they tried to overturn the election with violence, which to my mind is like sort of the worst part of all the bad things they've done, to the attacks on reproductive freedom, to the gun policy, which has now gone so far off the rails with what they're pushing for. All the different extreme things that they're doing, their extreme policies. I mean, we were talking before about their plan for gas prices. It's not exactly right that they don't have a plan. They do. They want to give tax cuts to the rich and tax cuts to oil and gas companies, right? That's one way they think that will bring down prices, right? That's their plan for everything. And I don't know, more thoughts about the Dem on Dem, what our friend Simon calls the family discussion that the Democrats are having. I think a little is healthy. I think having it sort of super publicly on Twitter is tough, but it's tough when there's people like, I'm not going to name names, when there's people you disagree with who have huge platforms, right? Like that's, I think, when that happens, we're different than from the Republicans. The Republicans never air their stuff and they always do it internally. I kind of like that we have the discussion in public sometimes. Like, I think that's part of one of our strengths, right? Is that we're willing to have these hard discussions, and like sometimes they're,
Well, when you have a big tent that everybody is welcome, then you're going to have differences of opinions. But if we can redirect to what's the big picture here, I feel like some of the back and forth was, this isn't far enough. We're not going far enough to fix something, right? Sort of an incrementalism argument. But I think what's the big picture? What are we working towards? I will help, I want to help us get there. This is step one. Can help sort of bring people back together. Some people just want to argue, and some people are trolls, like Jamie said. So
I think the other way to look at this, and the contrast stuff works great. Again, Joe Biden's created like 4 times the number of jobs that Trump did in his first year. Greatest entrepreneurial creation in the history of the country as well. We've created more small businesses under Joe Biden. We've given more money to people. We've invested more in workers. There's a lot of stuff that we've done that has been very positive. And again, these are people who are trying to take away our reproductive rights. These are people who refuse to act when children are being murdered in schools. These are people who attacked our Capitol, right? Who are literally burning books. There is a lot of stuff that they have done that is toxic, that would be disqualifying in any other election. And we need to make sure that voters are aware.
So I noticed we're a little after 6. I did want to add one more thing. There's a name that hasn't come up here that I think is really important, and I'm super biased, I admit it. This stuff that we're doing, all this testing, creating ads, all this is expensive. This has been a pretty big program. The Way to Win has raised this. A lot of this has come. I work for my wife, like my Jennifer Fernandez Ancona is the sort of has been the prime mover of this program. And I'm going to put her Twitter in here too. She's at Jen Ancona on Twitter. She doesn't tweet a whole lot. She's mostly like doing amazing amounts of fundraising for this work. Christiana and I are both so lucky to be here, because of her work. Totally biased, I admit. She is my life partner. But I just feel like we have to thank her and thank the whole Way to Win team for all the incredible hard work that they're doing on making all this possible.
And thank you, Jamie and Lori.
And thank you, DemCast, of course.
Yeah,
please.
This is great.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Yes, thank you
great
guys
vibes
so
in
much.
the chat. This is great.
Send us all those persuasive videos, and we will get them out everywhere.
We will make a nice landing page so that you can get them in one place. This is really, I talked to our web developer about it. It was our first choice web developer. It's an old friend of mine. He's incredible. And he actually has time. I didn't think he would have capacity, but he's really jazzed to do it. So that's good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Right. Thank you, guys.